I've never really been the type to post stuff like this, but after what happened, I can't stop thinking about it. Maybe writing it out will help, or maybe someone out there has been through something similar. For context, I'm 29, live alone in a small house just outside Columbus, Ohio. I moved here last year after a rough breakup, looking for a quieter life. I work from home doing graphic design, and my days are usually pretty uneventful. Coffee in the morning, long stretches in front of my monitor, walks in the evening. That day started like any other. It was a Thursday in late October, gray and drizzly. The kind of day where you just want to stay inside and not deal with anyone. Around 3 p.m., I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when the doorbell rang. That alone was strange. I don't get visitors. My neighbors mostly keep to themselves, and I hadn't ordered anything. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a man standing there in a dark blue windbreaker, the kind that kind of resembled something a cop might wear. He looked to be in his late 40s, tall, clean-shaven, short gray hair, holding what looked like a badge up to the peephole. "Police," he said, his voice firm but not aggressive. "Need to speak with you for a moment." Something in me hesitated, but everything about him, the tone, the badge, even the posture, felt official enough that I didn't question it. The second I turned the deadbolt and cracked the door open, it was like a switch flipped. He shoved the door with his shoulder, hard, and I stumbled back. 2 other men were suddenly behind him. I didn't even see them on the porch before. One was lanky and twitchy, wearing a red hoodie and jeans, maybe mid-30s. The other was stockier, bald, wearing a black jacket and gloves. The 3 of them pushed their way in like they'd done it 100 times. The first guy, the one who claimed to be a cop, slammed the door shut behind them and locked it. I remember him turning to me, calm as anything, and saying, "Don't do anything stupid, and this'll be quick." For a second, I honestly thought it was a mistake, like maybe they had the wrong house. My mind was scrambling for explanations. Maybe this was some kind of undercover sting, or maybe I'd opened the door to some kind of weird prank. But there was nothing funny about the way they moved. Everything was controlled, practiced. The guy in the red hoodie grabbed my phone from the counter and tossed it to the bald one, who immediately powered it off. "Where's the back door?" the stocky guy asked, like this was a routine checklist. I couldn't speak. I just pointed. My hands were shaking so bad I thought I was going to pass out. The one in the red hoodie stayed near me while the other 2 moved through the house. He kept glancing toward the hallway like he was waiting for something. He didn't threaten me directly, but his energy was off, jittery, like he was strung out or barely holding it together. I tried to stay calm, tried to keep breathing normally, but I could feel sweat running down my back. I asked him what they wanted, and he didn't answer at first. Just stood there tapping one of his fingers against his thigh. Then finally he looked at me and said, "We're not here for you. Just stay cool." The man who pretended to be a cop came back from the hallway holding the small lockbox I keep in the bedroom closet, the one with some savings, my passport, and a few personal things. He held it up and said, "Is this all of it?" I told him yes, even though I have a separate emergency stash taped under a drawer in the kitchen. He stared at me for a long moment like he could read my mind, but then tossed the box to the bald guy, who stuffed it into a duffel. "Check the attic," he said. "He looks like the type to hide stuff." I wanted to scream that there was nothing in the attic, just old winter clothes and a busted humidifier, but I was too scared to say anything. They were in my house for what felt like forever, but it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. Every second dragged. Every time one of them disappeared into another room, I imagined them finding something to use against me. A knife, a hammer, a reason to make this worse. The guy in the red hoodie kept pacing, muttering to himself, rubbing his hands together. At one point he walked right up to me, nose almost touching mine, and asked, "You live here alone?" I lied and said my brother was on his way over, that he was a cop too, just to throw something out there. He didn't react much, just grinned like I was bad at bluffing. Eventually, they regrouped near the front door. The leader, the fake cop, told me to sit on the floor and count to 100 before moving. Don't follow, don't call anyone. You'll be fine. Then he opened the door, peeked out, and they slipped away like shadows. I waited. I counted, probably way past 100, frozen there on the hardwood with my heart pounding. When I finally stood up, my legs buckled, and I had to grab the kitchen counter to keep from falling. My phone was still dead, but my work laptop was untouched. I used it to message a friend down the street and asked him to come over, didn't even say why. I didn't want to type it out. Saying it made it too real. The police arrived about 10 minutes after my friend did. I think he called them before even knocking on my door, which I'm grateful for, because I was in no condition to explain much. I gave my statement, described the three men in as much detail as I could. The gray-haired one pretending to be a cop, the wiry one in the red hoodie, the bald guy with the gloves. The officers took it seriously, which surprised me. No insinuations that I knew them. No questions that made it feel like I was being interrogated. One of the officers even said, "This wasn't random. They knew what they were looking for." That sentence stuck with me. The scary part is, I still don't know what they were looking for. The lockbox only had about $800 in cash, some documents, nothing valuable enough to justify that level of planning. I kept thinking maybe someone gave them the wrong address, or maybe it was just a test run for something worse. But the way they moved through the house, it wasn't aimless. They didn't touch anything in the living room, didn't even check the basement. It was like they came with a blueprint in their heads. They knew I'd be alone. They knew where to look. And they left without making a sound that any neighbor reported hearing. For weeks after, I barely slept. Every time I heard a car slow down outside or someone walk past my front steps, I'd freeze. I bought a second deadbolt, cameras, motion sensors, all of it. But none of it really helped. I felt watched, exposed. The worst part was not knowing how they chose me. I didn't post my address anywhere. I live a quiet, private life. And yet they picked my house, knocked on my door, walked in like they belonged there. Like they knew they'd leave before anyone could stop them. Eventually, I moved. Packed everything into a rental truck and drove 2 states over without telling anyone but my parents. I found a new place, new job, started fresh. Nothing like that has happened since, but the fear hasn't gone away. I still double-check the peephole, still get a knot in my stomach when someone rings the bell. And even now, when I think about that moment, the second I opened the door and saw them all there, I wonder how different my life would be if I had just not opened it. If I'd waited a minute longer, or if maybe they would have come in anyway. I've never actually written anything like this before, but after what happened, I've been finding it hard to sleep, and I figured putting it into words might help me process. My name's Caleb. I'm 27 now, but this happened when I was 19, still living in my hometown in Ohio. At the time, I was taking a break from college, trying to save money by working part-time at a gas station and staying with my grandmother, Evelyn. She raised me after my mom passed when I was little, so living with her again wasn't weird. We were close. That day was just supposed to be a lazy Sunday. We were in the living room watching Jeopardy, with a half-eaten bowl of popcorn between us. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. I remember the moment it started because the sound was so wrong. Not like someone knocking or even trying to open the door. It was this deep, cracking thud, like someone throwing their full weight against the wood. My grandma looked at me, confused, and I think my brain tried to explain it away. Maybe the wind, maybe a neighbor messing around. But then it happened again, louder, and before either of us could stand up, the door just exploded inward. Not like it creaked open or gave in slowly. It was torn off one hinge and slammed against the wall so hard the glass picture frames fell. 3 men stormed in, all wearing black hoodies with the hoods pulled so far down I couldn't see their faces. The first one grabbed me before I could even move, slammed me back into the couch and told me not to say a word. His voice was low, sharp, like someone used to giving orders. The second guy stood over my grandma, who had her hands up immediately, whispering something I couldn't make out. The third guy? He closed the door behind them, locked it, then pulled the curtains shut like they'd done this before. That was the scariest part. How coordinated they were. No yelling, no chaos. Just calm, collected, like they knew exactly what they were doing. I couldn't stop staring at the one closest to me. His jeans were splattered with something dark, and I kept wondering if it was oil or blood. My grandma tried to speak, tried to ask them what they wanted, but the guy near her just pressed a finger to his lips and shook his head. And then they made us sit on the floor, backs against the couch, while one of them disappeared down the hallway toward the bedrooms. I remember the sound of his boots on the wooden floor, slow and heavy, like he was checking every room. The guy near me stood with one hand inside his hoodie pocket the entire time. I don't know if he had a gun, but I wasn't about to find out. I kept thinking, this isn't random. They didn't ask for money. They didn't take our phones. They just kept us there, like they were waiting for something or someone. Time felt weird. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour, I honestly don't know, but it felt like forever. I remember sweating so much my shirt stuck to my back, even though the room wasn't hot. My grandma's hand brushed against mine on the floor, and I could feel how cold she was. She wasn't shaking, she was too proud for that. But her breathing was fast and shallow, like she was trying not to pass out. The guy who'd gone down the hallway came back eventually, and he had something in his hand, a small wooden box. I didn't recognize it. I don't even know where it came from. My grandma noticed it too, and I could feel her tense up like she'd just seen a ghost. That was when one of them finally spoke again. Not the leader, the quiet one, the one who'd locked the door. He looked at my grandma and said, "Where's the second one?" No emotion, no inflection. Just a flat question that made no sense to me at all. My grandma didn't respond at first. She just stared at the box. And then she whispered something like, "I burned it." The guy didn't like that. He stepped toward her fast, grabbed her by the collar of her cardigan and yanked her up to her knees. I jumped, tried to stand up, but the one next to me shoved me back down with his forearm across my chest. They started arguing, not shouting, just this intense, hushed exchange like they didn't want the neighbors to hear. I couldn't make out all of it, but I heard things like, "She lied," and "We need the second," and one of them said, "He doesn't know." That last one felt like it was about me. I still had no idea what was happening. I thought maybe they were looking for something my grandpa had. He passed before I was born. Maybe he left something behind. But why now? Why us? Why in the middle of the day in a quiet neighborhood where the loudest thing was usually the mail truck? Eventually, the guy holding her let go and she dropped back down beside me, looking more afraid than I've ever seen her. She leaned in and whispered, "Don't say anything. Just wait." I was trying to ask with my eyes what the hell was going on, but she wouldn't look at me. The guy with the box opened it then, right in front of us, and inside were two things: an old photograph, faded and bent, and a bundle wrapped in cloth. They unwrapped it like it was fragile, and inside was what looked like a piece of bone. Small, curved. Maybe a rib? It was yellowed with age. They examined it like it was valuable, almost sacred. I think that was the moment I stopped feeling like a victim in a robbery, and started feeling like I was caught in something way deeper. After that, they didn't speak much. The one who seemed to be in charge nodded to the others, and they started moving fast, not messy, not panicked, just fast. The guy near the hallway went back to the bedrooms, probably double-checking something. The one near the door peeked outside through the curtains like he was waiting for a signal. Before I could even try to make sense of what was happening, the leader crouched in front of my grandma and said almost gently, "If you're lying, it'll come back." Then they were gone. Just like that. No threats, no violence. They left the box sitting on the coffee table and walked out the front door like they hadn't just turned our world upside down. I stayed frozen for a good 10 seconds before I scrambled up and locked the door, even though it barely worked anymore. My grandma didn't move. She just sat there staring at the box like it was something alive. When I asked her what that was all about, she didn't answer. Not right away. Later that night, when things had calmed down a little, she told me it had to do with something from her past. Something she thought she'd gotten rid of a long time ago. She didn't explain much, just said there were people who believed in things that shouldn't be remembered. Whatever that meant, it scared her more than the men did. The next day, she packed the box back up and told me she was mailing it to someone in New Mexico, some man she hadn't spoken to in over 40 years. When I asked why, she just said, "He'll know what to do with it." After that, she got a new lock installed, and we didn't talk about it again. It was like some silent agreement between us. Ignore it, move on, pretend it didn't happen. But something had shifted in her. She kept the curtains closed all the time. Started sleeping with a bat next to her bed. And me? I still jump every time someone knocks on the door. To this day, I don't know what was in that box, not really. And I don't know who those men were or how they knew about it. But what gets me is how precise they were, how quiet, how certain. Like this was part of something much bigger, and we'd just been one small stop on a long twisted road. I don't think they were done. I just think, for whatever reason, they didn't need us anymore. And that thought? It still keeps me up at night. I'm not really sure why I'm writing this. Maybe I just need to get it out. Maybe I want to hear if anyone's been through something similar. My name's Tyler, I'm 29, and this happened just a few months ago, in the middle of winter, around late January. I live alone in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a rundown building in Milwaukee. Nothing fancy, just one bedroom, a cramped kitchen, and a living room that still had moving boxes stacked in the corners, even though I moved in almost a year ago. I work remotely in IT, so most of my days are quiet, and nights even quieter. I don't party, I don't mess with anyone, and I've never borrowed money from anyone in my life. That's what makes what happened so damn confusing. That night, I stayed up later than usual working on a freelance project. It was close to 2:30 a.m. when I finally shut my laptop. I remember that specific time because I glanced at the digital clock on my stove while pouring myself a glass of water. My apartment was dead silent, except for the occasional creak of old pipes and the humming radiator. I was walking back toward my bedroom when I heard a soft thump at the front door. It wasn't a knock. It sounded more like a foot accidentally brushing against the door frame. I froze. Then I heard it again, louder this time, followed by a whisper. A man's voice. Then another. I crept toward the door, careful not to step on the loose floorboard near the hallway. My peephole's always been fogged over, so I couldn't see anything clearly. Just the blur of movement. I was about to call out when someone pounded on the door, hard. "Open up! You know why we're here!" a voice shouted. I swear I didn't recognize it. My heart jumped into my throat. Another voice yelled, "We don't want to hurt you, but you owe us. You think we wouldn't find you?" That's when I realized I had never heard these voices in my life. I wasn't involved in anything shady. I didn't owe anyone a damn thing. I backed away slowly and grabbed my phone, hands trembling so bad I nearly dropped it. I dialed 911, whispered my address, and told the operator someone was trying to break in. The whole time they kept pounding. One of them started trying to jiggle the doorknob while another kicked the bottom of the door again and again. It sounded like they were about to bust it off the hinges. I ran to the bedroom, locked the door, and crouched in the corner behind my dresser. That's when I heard the sound I'll never forget. Metal scraping against metal, like they were picking the lock. My front door didn't even have a deadbolt. Just that old twist lock built into the knob. I don't know how, but they got in. The sound of the door creaking open felt like it echoed through the entire building. I held my breath, hoping maybe the bedroom door would hold, but I knew better. My apartment was old, and that flimsy lock wouldn't stop anyone determined. I heard footsteps, heavy ones, moving slowly through the living room. They didn't speak at first, which somehow made it worse. Just slow, calculated steps, like they were listening. One of them knocked lightly on my bedroom door, like we were old friends. "Tyler?" one of them said, drawing out the name like he'd known me forever. "We just want to talk, man. You made this harder than it had to be." My throat went dry. I didn't respond. I was trying to keep as quiet as possible, but I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Then the door handle jiggled, once, twice, and suddenly a loud crack as someone slammed their shoulder into it. The first hit didn't break it, but the second one splintered the wood. I scrambled for something to use as a weapon. The only thing nearby was a heavy lamp. I unplugged it and held it in both hands, crouched low like some terrified animal. The door burst open on the third hit, and I saw them, 3 guys, all in dark hoodies, with bandanas covering the lower halves of their faces. One of them had something in his hand. At first I thought it was a gun, but it was a tire iron. The guy with the tire iron stepped in first. He had pale blue eyes and a small scar on his left eyebrow, like an old cut that never healed right. He looked straight at me like he wasn't surprised I was there, like this was just another part of their plan. "Where's the money?" he asked. Calm, too calm. I kept saying I didn't know what they were talking about, that they had the wrong person, that I don't owe anyone anything, but they didn't listen. The other 2 started going through my drawers, tossing clothes on the floor, flipping the mattress. One of them grabbed my backpack and dumped it out on the carpet. I kept asking them who they were. I begged them to tell me what they thought I'd done. But they just kept searching. Then something shifted. The guy with the scar stepped closer, still holding the tire iron. He crouched in front of me, stared at me for a long second like he was trying to read my face. "You really don't know, do you?" he muttered. He turned to the others and said, "He doesn't know. This ain't him." My heart was racing, but I didn't move. One of the others, the tallest one with a weird limp and a shaved head, snapped, "We sure? We came all this way." But Scar Eyebrow just stood up and said, "Let's go. Now." No explanation, no apology. They backed out of the room and walked out the same way they came in, leaving my door hanging off its hinges and my entire apartment torn apart. I didn't move for a long time, just sat there gripping the lamp, shaking so hard I couldn't feel my fingers. The silence after they left felt louder than their footsteps. I only snapped out of it when I heard the police sirens outside, a full 7 minutes after I'd called. They came up, found the front door wide open, and found me still on the bedroom floor. I told them everything, every word, every sound, but there wasn't much they could do. No cameras in the building, no neighbors who saw anything. The officer looked around, sighed, and said, "Could be a mistaken identity, or something worse." They filed a report and told me to stay with someone for a few nights just in case. I ended up crashing at my co-worker Nate's place for nearly 2 weeks. I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying it all in my head, especially the part where that guy looked me dead in the eye and said, "You really don't know." That sentence stuck with me. What did he mean? Was it a warning? Was I caught up in something I had no clue about? I started digging through everything, bank accounts, emails, even trying to remember if someone could have used my name or address somehow, But nothing. Clean. I've never even had a speeding ticket. Eventually, I moved. I couldn't stay in that apartment, not with the busted door frame and the constant fear every time the floor creaked. I picked a new place across town in a more secure building, this time with cameras, a reinforced door, and a damn bolt lock that could stop a truck. I still check the peephole 10 times a night. Still sleep with something heavy beside the bed. I wish I could say I got closure, that they found the guys, that it made sense. But none of that happened. They just vanished. No follow-up, no threats, no notes. Just a single night that flipped everything upside down. And here's the part that really messes with me. I still don't know if they were telling the truth. What if someone did use my name? What if I really was supposed to owe someone and I just never knew? Or worse, what if they weren't even after money at all, and that was just what they said to get in? That thought keeps me up more than anything else, because at least owing someone makes sense. Random doesn't. Random means it could happen again, anywhere, to anyone. Anyway, that's it. I haven't told a lot of people the full story before. Most don't believe it. But if you've read this far, thanks. I don't know what that night was about. I don't know who they were. But I do know that ever since then, I double lock everything. I don't answer the door unless I'm expecting someone, and I don't sleep easy anymore. Not really. My name's Rachel, I'm 38, and I've been running a small antique business out of my home in Oregon for the past 6 years. It started as a side hustle on Etsy, but after the pandemic hit, I leaned in full-time. I live alone in a single-story house, just me, my dog Lucy, and a porch full of half-sanded furniture waiting to be flipped. My days are quiet. I restore, I sell, I pack orders. Once a week, I list larger pieces on Craigslist for local pickup. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and I genuinely love finding beauty in old, forgotten things. Up until a few months ago, I thought the only real risk in my job was someone lowballing me on a mahogany cabinet. I was wrong. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I listed an antique mirror. Gold frame, slightly cracked on the bottom right, but still stunning. Not even an hour after I posted it, I got a message from a guy named Scott. He sounded polite, said he was obsessed with vintage decor, and could come by that same day. He arrived right around 5, driving an older red pickup that rattled like it was barely holding itself together. Scott looked to be in his 40s, lean, with salt and pepper stubble and a denim jacket that looked more lived in than most of the stuff I sell. He examined the mirror for maybe 2 minutes, said, "Yep, I'll take it," and handed me cash without haggling, which should have been my first red flag. But then he lingered, not in a creepy, obvious way, more like someone killing time before their next stop. He asked if the house was original to the property or a rebuild. I told him it was built in the 50s. He whistled and said, "Bet it's got all kinds of cool nooks and crannies inside." I just gave a polite smile, trying not to encourage the conversation. Then he asked if I worked from home. I said yes, not really thinking much of it, and he nodded slowly, like that detail was more interesting than it should have been. He glanced at the porch chairs, the plants, even peeked around the side of the house as he was leaving. "Bet you've got a lot of treasures in there," he said, pointing vaguely toward the interior. I laughed awkwardly and thanked him for the purchase. He waved, backed out of the driveway, and that should have been the end of it. 3 days later, I noticed the side gate to my garden was unlatched. It's an old iron gate that scrapes when you open it. I would have heard it if someone had come through during the day. More than that, one of the chairs from my front porch was missing. Just gone. It didn't blow away, it wasn't stolen by teens. It was an old wooden rocker, heavy and loud as hell when you moved it. I stood there staring at the empty space, trying to reason with myself. Maybe I moved it to the back for sanding? But no, I would have remembered. I checked the backyard. Nothing. That's when I got this cold, crawling sensation in my gut. Not panic. Not yet. But that quiet, prickly feeling like something just didn't sit right. That night I double-checked every door and window before bed. I even locked the interior door that leads to the garage, which I never usually do. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was probably unrelated. Maybe someone snatched the chair just for fun. But as I lay in bed, I couldn't ignore this weird awareness. You know that instinct when you feel like you're being watched, even though you're alone? I had that. Like the silence in the house wasn't just silence. Like it was holding its breath. Lucy, my dog, kept pacing the hallway, ears perked up. But every time I got up to check, there was nothing. At around 2 a.m., I finally dozed off with the TV on low. The next morning, I found muddy scuff marks on the floor near the back window in the laundry room. At first I thought maybe Lucy had dragged something in from the yard, but the prints were bigger than her paws, longer, like boots. And the window above them? Unlatched. My stomach dropped. I had cleaned that exact window the week before and knew it was locked. I stared at it for a solid minute, trying to talk myself out of what I already knew. Someone had come inside. That someone had been in my house. Maybe while I was sleeping. I called a locksmith that same day and had every lock replaced. I even added deadbolts. But still, the feeling stuck with me, like the walls were holding on to something I couldn't see. The real breaking point came 2 nights later. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. A slow, deliberate creaking coming from above me. Not pipes, not the usual house settling. It was weight shifting on wood, like someone trying to move quietly in an old attic crawl space. My heart stopped. I live in a single-story house, and the attic is barely big enough to store Christmas lights. I stood there, toothbrush still in my mouth, staring at the ceiling like it might blink back. Then another creak. And another. I backed into the hallway, grabbed my phone with shaking hands, and called the police. I didn't want to sound crazy, but something was up there. Something, or someone, was moving. The cops arrived about 10 minutes later, and I swear, I've never been so relieved to see flashing lights in my life. 2 officers came in, did a sweep of the house, and I explained everything. The mirror sale, the questions, the porch chair, the muddy prints, and now the noises. They were polite but clearly skeptical, until one of them opened the attic hatch in the hallway and aimed his flashlight inside. He froze, then looked at his partner and whispered something I couldn't hear. They asked me to step outside. 10 minutes later, one of them came out and said, "Ma'am, there's a man up there. He's alive. We're getting him down now." Turns out it was Scott. The same guy who bought the mirror. He'd broken in through the back window the night the porch chair went missing. That was his way of climbing up. He dragged the chair beneath the laundry window, slipped in while I was asleep, and then used the hallway shelves to pull himself into the attic crawl space. The attic door is one of those small square panels with no ladder. I never used it. I hadn't even thought about it since I moved in. The police said he'd been up there at least 2 nights, maybe more. He brought a backpack, a flashlight, water bottles, and protein bars. It was like he planned to camp out there. Later I found out that his real name wasn't even Scott. The phone number he used on Craigslist was a burner. He had a history, 2 prior arrests for breaking and entering, 1 for stalking. They think he was watching the house before he ever messaged me about the mirror. The questions, the lingering on the porch, the way he scoped out the side of the house, none of it was random. The worst part? He told the cops he thought I'd leave for work during the day so he could rob the place. But when he realized I worked from home, he got stuck, trapped in his own plan. I try not to think too hard about what might have happened if I did leave the house, or if I'd gone into the attic for any reason. I didn't sleep properly for weeks after that. Every sound in the house made me jump. I installed cameras, motion sensors, upgraded my locks again, and even got one of those panic buttons that calls the cops if you hold it for 3 seconds. My dog Lucy, bless her, hasn't left my side since. She knew something was wrong that night, and I'll always feel guilty for brushing it off. I took some time off from Craigslist after that, stuck to online orders only, no local pickups, no strangers on the property. Even now, when someone knocks on the door unexpectedly, I freeze for a second. That gut-deep fear never really goes away. But the attic is empty now. I had it sealed and professionally inspected. I even had the hatch bolted shut. It's just wood and dust again. But every once in a while, late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm lying in bed, I still find myself staring at the ceiling, wondering how long he was up there before I noticed, wondering what would have happened if I hadn't. I'm not exactly famous, but for a while, I was getting just enough attention online to feel like I was doing something right. My name's Danielle, I'm 29, and I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment just outside of Portland. I work part-time at a plant shop, and on the side I post lifestyle content, morning routines, outfit inspo, cozy apartment shots, that kind of thing. My account started picking up steam late last year, mostly because people seem to like the way I styled my space. I have a thing for warm lighting, minimalist furniture, and thrifted mugs, which apparently makes me aesthetic. I wasn't trying to be an influencer, it just kind of happened, and I was enjoying it, until I wasn't. It started with the DMs. At first, they were normal, people asking where my rug was from or complimenting my plants, but then one account started replying to almost every story. The messages weren't creepy at first, just too familiar. Like he'd reference stuff I hadn't posted about in a while, or mention routines I didn't realize I'd been that consistent with. Heading to the cafe again? He wrote one morning, even though I hadn't said where I was going. Another time, after I posted a shot of my hallway mirror, he replied, "I like that you leave your sneakers by the door. Makes it feel like home." That's when I started getting uncomfortable. I checked his profile. No posts, no followers, generic username. Just a blank face watching mine. I told myself I was being paranoid. The internet blurs boundaries, and maybe I was just oversharing. I tightened my privacy settings, stopped geotagging places, and tried to shake off the unease. But it lingered, especially when I filmed at home. My apartment, which used to feel like my safe little bubble, suddenly felt exposed. It didn't help that I was working on a sponsored video that week, so I was filming a lot more than usual. I remember feeling weird that day, like I was being watched, even though the blinds were down. I set up my tripod in my bedroom, lit a candle, and started recording a skincare routine. I didn't know it then, but in the story I posted earlier, a mirror selfie in my living room, you could see the balcony door behind me, unlocked. That night I was editing the video in bed when I heard something in the kitchen. At first I thought it was the fridge making noise. It does that sometimes. But then came footsteps. Actual slow footsteps across the tile floor. I froze. My first thought was that maybe I'd left the front door unlocked, but that didn't make sense. I always triple-check it. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I sat up and listened, trying to convince myself it was nothing, but then I heard a drawer open. That sound is unmistakable in my kitchen. The drawer catches a little, and you have to tug it. That's when I knew. Someone was inside. I didn't scream. I didn't even move at first. It's like my body was stuck in place while my mind tried to catch up. I remember whispering, "No, no, no," over and over, like saying it would undo whatever was happening. My phone was still in my hand, so I crawled, literally crawled, off the bed and onto the floor, trying not to make a sound. My bedroom door was slightly ajar, and from that angle I could see the faint glow from the kitchen light leaking into the hallway. I kept staring at that light, waiting to see a shadow move across it. When I finally heard another step, this time closer, I bolted for the bathroom. I slammed the door shut and locked it in one motion. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone, had to fumble around in the dark to find it again. I didn't even turn on the bathroom light. I just sat with my back pressed against the tub, knees to my chest, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. I whispered to the dispatcher that someone was in my apartment. I remember apologizing a lot, saying I didn't know if I was overreacting, saying I was sorry for whispering, sorry for not knowing where the person was. The dispatcher stayed calm, asked if I could still hear them. I couldn't. Everything had gone quiet again, which somehow made it worse. It felt like forever before I heard the faint sound of footsteps again, this time moving toward the bedroom. I covered my mouth with both hands, trying not to breathe too loud. I imagined him standing right outside the bathroom door, deciding whether or not to try it. I couldn't hear breathing, but I swear I could feel it, like the air had changed. And then, nothing. Silence, for what felt like years. I didn't know if he'd left, if he was still in the apartment, or if he was just waiting for me to come out. The dispatcher told me the police were outside, and asked if I could get to the front door. I told her no. I wasn't opening that door unless someone in uniform kicked it in themselves. Eventually, I heard pounding, real pounding, at the front door, followed by a voice shouting, "Police!" over and over. I hesitated, but then I cracked the bathroom door just enough to peek. I didn't see anyone in the hallway, so I sprinted. The moment I opened the front door, 2 officers rushed in past me. I collapsed on the floor outside my apartment, shaking and crying, still clutching my phone like it was a lifeline. They didn't find him inside, but they did find the balcony door wide open, and one of my kitchen drawers pulled all the way out. Nothing was missing. He wasn't there to rob me. The officers stayed with me while I gave my statement. I was still shaking, trying to explain that I lived alone, that I never left that balcony door unlocked, that I had no idea how someone could have known how to get in. One of them asked if I'd posted anything online that day that might have shown too much of my apartment layout. That's when it hit me. The mirror selfie. I opened my story and looked at it again. And yeah, there it was. In the reflection, clear as day. The little latch on the sliding door, slightly tilted up, the way it looks when it's not locked. I felt sick. I hadn't even noticed it when I posted. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. How he knew my routines, when I'd be filming, even which direction my bedroom faced based on the lighting I always bragged about. I went back through my stories from the past month and realized just how much I'd shared without meaning to. You could tell what floor I was on from the view. You could see my building's layout, the number on my mailbox in the background once. I'd basically handed this guy a blueprint. I didn't know how long he'd been watching or if that was even his first time trying to come inside, and honestly, that's what messed me up the most. I took a break from everything after that, deleted all my posts, locked my account, stopped filming altogether. I installed a second lock on the balcony, got a camera, even changed some furniture around to make things less recognizable. The police never caught the guy. They said without a clear face or ID, it'd be tough to track him down. They took fingerprints, but nothing came back. Apparently he was careful. I've moved since then. Different part of town, top floor, no balcony. And now, even when I post something as harmless as a coffee photo, I obsess over the background like I'm scrubbing evidence from a crime scene. People always say you should be careful what you post online, but I don't think most folks really understand why until something like this happens. I wasn't famous, just visible, and someone decided that was enough. Sometimes I wonder if he still watches my stories from a burner account, just waiting. But I don't let myself spiral. I learned the hard way that the internet gives strangers a window into your life. but it's up to you whether that window is locked. I'm not really the type to post stuff like this, but after what happened, I haven't been able to sleep right. Maybe putting it into words will help clear my head. My name's Ryan, I'm 27, and last year I moved into a rental house just outside of Columbus, Ohio, with two other guys, Tyler and Ben. We're not super close, more like co-workers who got along well enough to split rent. All three of us work night shifts in different parts of the city. Tyler drives for a medical courier company, Ben does overnight stock at a big box store, and I bartend downtown Thursday through Sunday. That night, though, it was Monday. My day off. I had the whole house to myself. The place we rented isn't anything fancy. Older two-story house with one of those unfinished basements that smells like damp concrete and dust. We only ever go down there to do laundry. The washer and dryer are tucked in a corner near a small, high-up window that doesn't even fully close. We meant to bring it up with the landlord, but never got around to it. The basement door is in the hallway between the kitchen and the back entrance. It has one of those old metal latches you flip into place to lock. Nothing special. That night, I'd been in my room playing something on my laptop with headphones on. Around 3 a.m. I got up to grab a drink and stretch my legs. That's when I heard it. This soft, rhythmic thump, 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 like something knocking gently from under the floor. At first I froze. It wasn't loud, but it felt weird, out of place. I took my headphones off, held my breath, and listened. It came again. Thump, pause, thump. I figured maybe one of the guys had come home early and dropped something in the laundry room. It wouldn't be the first time. I checked my phone. No new messages. But I scrolled back and saw the texts. Tyler had messaged around 10 p.m. saying he was crashing at his girlfriend's, and Ben had mentioned earlier that he was pulling a double shift. So, the house should have been empty. Except it didn't feel empty anymore. I crept toward the kitchen, trying not to make a sound. The hallway light was off, but there was just enough glow from the fridge to make out shapes. I stood in front of the basement door, heart racing. It was open. Not wide, just barely cracked, but enough that I could see the latch. The damn thing was hanging down like it had been forced. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, staring into that thin black gap, expecting something to move on the other side. That's when it hit me. If someone was down there, they'd been there a while, and they didn't want to be found. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any noise. Every creak in the floor felt like a gunshot. I didn't want to turn my back to the door, so I sort of shuffled sideways down the hallway until I was in my room. As soon as I got inside, I locked the door and slid my dresser in front of it, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my ears. I was sweating like crazy, but my hands were cold. That kind of cold you get when your body knows something's wrong before your brain fully catches up. I didn't want to believe someone was in our house, but the open door, the broken latch, and the noises, it all lined up too perfectly. I grabbed my phone again and dialed 911. I remember whispering, barely able to get the words out, telling the dispatcher I thought someone was in my basement. She kept asking questions I could barely process. My address, if I could hear anything now, if I was alone. I told her yes, I was alone, and yes, the noises had stopped. That part was almost worse. Total silence. Not even the old pipes knocking. I felt like whoever was down there knew I'd heard them, and now they were waiting. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and stay put. Officers were already on their way. Those 10 minutes felt like an hour. I kept staring at the crack under my door, like I expected to see feet stop in front of it any second. At one point, I thought I heard something shuffle in the hallway, but I told myself it was just my mind spiraling. Still, I stayed dead silent, barely even breathing, Like any sound would trigger something I couldn't take back. When I finally saw red and blue lights flash through my window, I nearly collapsed with relief. I heard the front door open. We always leave it unlocked when we're home. And then heavy boots and loud voices calling out, "Columbus Police!" I stayed locked in my room until one of the officers knocked and told me it was safe. I moved the dresser and opened the door, and there were two cops standing there, both looking a little rattled. One of them asked me if I knew a man named James. I said no. Then he said they'd found someone hiding behind the washer downstairs. A man in his 30s, unshaven, wearing dark clothes. He had a knife in one hand and a duffel bag in the other. He didn't say a word when they found him. Just stood there. According to them, he'd gotten in through the basement window, the one that never closed right. And they think he'd been in the house for at least 3 hours, just waiting. What messed me up the most wasn't just that he was inside. It was why he was there. The officers didn't go into detail, but one of them pulled me aside and said the guy had packed duct tape, gloves, zip ties, and a change of clothes in the duffel. That he didn't break in to steal a TV. He was waiting for someone to come downstairs. He'd probably heard me walking around upstairs, maybe even heard the fridge door open when I went to get water. And he stayed completely quiet after that. I kept thinking, what if I had gone down to do laundry without checking my phone? What if I'd just opened that door and walked right into the basement? After they took him away, I couldn't bring myself to stay in the house that night. I drove to a 24-hour diner and just sat in my car for 2 hours, staring at nothing. I texted Tyler and Ben what happened, and they both freaked out. Ben ended up meeting me at the diner. We agreed not to sleep there until the landlord fixed every lock and sealed that basement window for good. A couple days later, we all chipped in and bought a cheap security system too. The guy they arrested? I never found out what happened to him. I tried searching his name, but nothing ever came up. No charges, no mugshot. It was like he just disappeared back into the system. To this day, I still check every window and door twice before I sleep. Doesn't matter where I live. I even bought one of those little doorstop alarms for my bedroom just in case. I'll never forget that feeling. Standing in the hallway, staring at that slightly open basement door, knowing deep down something wasn't right. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't see anything move, but I felt it. Like the air had changed, just enough for your body to notice. It's crazy how your instincts kick in when they need to. I used to think I'd react like a badass in a situation like that, but the truth is, I froze. I got lucky. I guess the reason I'm posting this is because I keep seeing people talk about how they never lock the basement door, or how leaving a window cracked isn't a big deal. But it is. It really is. That one broken latch, the one we never got around to fixing, was the only reason he could have come up whenever he wanted. He didn't, but he could have. And that's the part I'll never forget. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what happens. It's what almost did.